we had a big park within a half a mile of town centre, a massive park. And what they did in that park, they rigged it all up with tents and sandpits, and they had holidays at home there. They had massive marquees where they used to run shows and things like that. And I always remember it were a bank holiday Monday, and the sirens went, and we had these planes flying low, and my mother grabbed hold of us. My dad were at work, and my mother grabbed hold of us and rushed in the shelter which were in this yard. And we had this huge explosions and gunfire. And of course my mother being on her own, and there were me and my sister, she was in a bit of a state like, and we huddled in this shelter in this particular afternoon, and it were a day like today. It were August Bank Holiday Monday, which in them days it were the beginning of August, and we were having a rainstorm. It stormed it down with rain all day, so the park were empty. Now then we found out later that these two planes that came in and dive bombed onto this particular park thought it were an army camp. Must have thought, because one of the planes were bought down near Kent, down in Kent, and they found they found photographs in this plane of that particular park showing all these tents laid out. So they must have thought, there were two stray aircraft, and they must have thought that this were an army camp, and they were being chased, and they dropped the load of whatever they've got and opened fire and be off. But one of them were brought down, they told us one were brought down near Kent, and this is what they found on them. So that brought the war a bit closer, that to hear these big explosions and gunfire. Anyway, my dad had come home at tea time, he'd rushed home, make sure everybody were okay. And next day, he took us up. Now, we only lived 10 minutes off this park. And we all went up to the park one night, about 2 or 3 days later. And there was huge bomb craters. 2 massive bomb craters amongst all these tents had gone, had been shattered, and the houses round about all slates were off and windows were out, and there were a lot of damage to property. But in actual fact, nobody got killed. But they put that, if it had been a fine day, that park would have been packed, because it was Bank Holiday Monday, and bank holidays there were always something going off, and that park used to be packed regular at weekends, and that's why it were on. It was called Holidays at Home, and there were sand pits and roundabouts and things like that. And that really brought it home that this is real, like this war. And then different things went off. My grandfather used to come every day to see us, and he'd always have local paper with him, and I'd heard him chatting about what we were doing in Europe and what was happening, and then we had Normandy landings, and all this were picked up because, as I said, grown-ups were talking, and we picked all this information up, what they were telling us about what were going on in war. And then, of course, 1945 come, and we had the war were over, and then I recall that they had great big buses, double-decker electric buses, all decked out with lights on, because all lights, we hadn't seen no street lighting or car lighting much throughout war, and these buses were all lit up, and we went down into town, and town were packed, and there were gas lamps in them days, massive gas lamps, and all gas lamps, and we as kids had never ever seen town lit up like this. It was like a massive festival, and everybody were cheering and they were dancing, but as kids, like, we didn't understand how serious it had all been. And when this went on, it was part of like holidays at home to young kids, and it were only in later years, as you discussed it and read about it, how serious this were on. But as a youngster, 6, 7, 8 year old, there were certain things you picked up. There were, and you've always remembered about. But it really didn't come through to you how serious this war game really were until later on, and you read about it, and you had your relations come home from war and talked about it. I had an uncle who were at Dunkirk, and he used to tell us what had gone on at Dunkirk as they'd escaped from Dunkirk and what they'd had to put up with. And to youngsters of my age, it were, I said, like an exciting era, because we used to like going in shelters and things like that. And then, as I said, my father took us out in town, which were like going on small holidays. So we'd been out in town 3 or 4 times, living with other people, and I still see them houses today. I know the houses we went to, because as you got older you understood things differently. And I have to say that in my family there were nobody who ever went into the forces. There were nobody ever were a casualty of war. So we're lucky in that respect. And since then I've read more and more about it and understood more about it and what people sacrificed and what we sacrificed as youngsters. I mean, never saw bananas. We saw them in pictures, or oranges, or and you went to shop for your sweets, and you had to give them they tore a little tag out and you put your sweets on, and said, oh, you've got too much there, you can't have that. We were rationed with sweets and rationed with food, and all them things I remember about. It were everything you had to have a ration book. And gradually, of course, after war, that slowly disappeared.